How do we begin to assess that then? Arsenal have won away on the opening day, 1-0 against Manchester United, and first and foremost, I'm relieved. I'm over the moon. I think it shows how far away from social media you can be at times, because as soon as the final whistle blew, I was grateful for the win, ready to acknowledge and to learn, as today's video I hope is going to allow you to do, but move on too from a below par performance. Winning games we haven't necessarily deserved to have come at a premium in the past, and I'm all for adding a couple more of those. But the performance seems to have hung over a few more others. Is that fair? Well, welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once more. And today, I'm going to tactically analyse Arsenal's opening day win, looking at our intent to release, to play at speed, and to try and bring Gyökeres into the game. But why then this didn't quite come off? We're going to spend some time too on some better moments on the ball and some solutions too to clean up our play. For example, the impetus someone like Riccardo Calafiori shows he has on our dynamics. But also, we're going to move on and look at why we couldn't gain control. And that was determined, I think it's fair to say, by an under-the-weather press, and Manchester United themselves exacerbated some of these issues, and then our own insecurities, which helped, I think, direct the momentum of the game out of our favour. Before we tackle all of that though, I want to begin with, let's admit it, the real purpose we demonstrated in breaking quickly, releasing early, and encouraging that pre-season uptick in tempo that we have seen, but also why it didn't come off, not just for Gyökeres, but for the whole team. Despite not running the game, Martin Zubimendi managed to play a number of these initial breakers. There's an urgency to take advantage of the space following a turnover here, and I want to pause it at this moment with Odegaard releasing and look at Gyökeres against the two United centre-backs. This is where the Swede cashes in. Lines have been broken, De Ligt is in between and Yoro is trying to hold the line. Gyökeres is spearing in behind. The release forces him wide though, meaning he can't add that smash across goal that he has in his arsenal. Let's pivot to Odegaard and his role yesterday for a second though, and let's keep sensationalism to one side because I thought overall he was integral to our play, as I'll come on to show. I've also spoken about my thoughts on Martin Odegaard at length, but he hasn't had that weight of release on the pass nailed for a while, I think, and that can hamper momentum on the break. It can close down small openings, but the releases that he showed yesterday were without hesitation, and that mindset is super important in terms of taking better advantage of some of these moments that we're seeing now. But what is also positive is Saka's positioning here, grabbing a few more yards and starting on the last line. And moving back to Gyökeres, Odegaard's left-footedness, yes, but also the direction of the ball sends Gyökeres wider. But let's not act like Odegaard can't improve, and he needs to, or use a different technique, a Trivela pass, for example, to get Gyökeres in behind. But I'm conscious that purpose and that structure need execution. Here we go from Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard operating deeper alongside Zubimendi to Rice in more of that central pinning role, creating a space in between that 2 and 3 in Manchester United's front two lines of pressing. Odegaard and Zubimendi recognise this space, Martinelli and Gyökeres begin to crisscross, and Odegaard's head is up, whipping it into the space for Gyökeres to try and attach himself onto. It's heavy, again, it's overhit, and I agree, I think, with the notion that Odegaard doubling up with Gyökeres in these left channels is a much more natural relationship. Some call for a straight swap between Odegaard and Rice in our 4-3-3. Look, that's not going to happen, and I don't actually necessarily disagree with that, as I've said before, because I do agree that within games there can and should be more freedom to commit to a rotation between Rice and Odegaard in certain situations. Because think, irrespective of any changes in system, how much our midfield anyway can swirl and rotate. Zubimendi's ability to nip higher, allow Odegaard to drop in, drift left, or create this kind of balance like we saw against Athletic Club, which is never static, always moving around. You'd rather, I think, as well, Odegaard releasing, then carrying and delaying like he does in this example here. But again though, in this passage you see the punch that Calafiori can give us with his disguised balls and unpredictable intent. Let's turn to the Italian now. He's established a really nice connection already with Martin Zubimendi, and when he's darting off ball like this, Calafiori is so hard to control, as Mbermo finds out. enabling here that progression to Saka 1v1. Here's another example. We find that Athletic Club balance. Zubimendi fires it into Calafiori, who turns down the option to funnel it out wide in either direction and holds onto it just a split second longer, which opens up the ball with the outside of his foot through to Saka. And still on Calafiori, I want to highlight one moment which came to nothing, but I think it's so instructive of his unpredictability, that word both myself and Arteta constantly stress with Calafiori. Most players receiving it here see themselves isolated with two players pressing them and either turn back to play towards the goalkeeper or pop it into the channel for someone to run onto. Calafiori actually begins to carry towards them. He takes a touch towards them, then punches a pass through these two pressers. And that's a risk, of course, with such open space left behind him. But I think the urgency that Calafiori shows here means that the pressers aren't actually close enough to threaten that. Calafiori plays quickly against the grain of momentum, and that changes pictures. And when it doesn't come off like it does here, and breaks for Odegaard, who tries the exact same thing, we can talk about execution and decisions, but we can hold that, I think, in one hand and have at the same time how pleasing it is to see that intent in the other. The two can coexist. And Mikel spoke after the game about how we should have hurt United more in open spaces, and our failure to do so meant it came back in transition immediately the other way. And what I really liked to hear was the emphasis from Arteta on it was the execution, not the intent, not the lack of counter cover that was wrong. In short, what he's saying is it only became a basketball game because we executed it wrong. So there are no criticisms here that can be levelled at ideas of risk tolerance, for example. I mean, as Rice swings low alongside Zubimendi and whips a ball, or tries to whip a ball, first time out to Saka in behind. I love this choice of pass, but in a game where Rice's distribution was a little awry to normal, and Saka here wasn't quite in tune, wasn't cheating off that last line, it shows things are still a work in progress in the classroom a little bit. And this execution was a team-wide issue. White looks to accelerate and give and go with Saka after another turnover, and it's lost, and a counter-attack is launched by Manchester United. And again, the fault is equally spread in this sequence. You can see the risk Manchester United run themselves with the low numbers that they have and who they have back protecting themselves for the transition. We've looked to cluster together, I think, and get our wingers making more strikery movements in pre-season. But there, I think, is a lack of commitment in this example on our narrow angles, which forces Odegaard, who isn't an eliminator 1v1, to release and just sort of hope and pray. And these were some of the high tariff moments our attacking play had to rest on yesterday. It's funny because if you ever need a reminder, you can set up all the intentions that you want. You can set up the in-possession structure that we had, which can tilt and rotate like it did against Athletic Club, but especially at Old Trafford, especially on the opening day, if you play loose balls, or a second late to knockdowns, or a little jittery with your touches, weird dominoes start to fall and play and momentum surges against you. And that's what happened against United. This was one of the first times we saw Zubimendi actively changing his heights on the ball 20 minutes in. Calafiori and Rice began to swirl, balancing that off-ball movement and punch with coming towards the ball. Odegaard dropped in, who was more yesterday again, just looking for advantages, but with some of these deeper touches, he helped us so much for settling us down at times when things were squeezed and bouncy. And here, Odegaard exchanges with Zubimendi, who sees the space created and darts into it. Suddenly, possession feels cleaner. We break it for Saka. It's lost, but as we come back round in possession, suddenly, just one unsure touch, Cunha pounces on Raya, and the crowd are back into the game again, and United feel back on top. Let's focus on dynamics around Gyökeres more specifically though now. Our actual usage of Gyökeres, which wasn't intended to be as severe as this because Mikel would have expected more dominance, but it was essentially how I would expect a Kai Havertz to be used. Gyökeres was backboarding our play, being the main target from Raya's launches, holding it up back to goal, linking with Saka, and there were moments he had positive actions here. But if we take a look at this with Martinelli knocking it into Gyökeres, who brings in Odegaard, this type of look with the wingers the highest and widest, Gyökeres in that sort of almost twin-tenning position, is a Kai Havertz dynamic, and being a release valve for a long ball, getting us up the pitch, not through always sprinting in behind, but being hit more directly, are qualities you find it very difficult to find anyone who can match Havertz at that. So I think with Gyökeres in the centre forward, we had to, and we should have got more creative with the exit routes that we tried to find. I was calling us to hit Saka directly a bit more, and in the second half we did try and do this, but Shaw was up to the task. But becoming more unpredictable with where that launch goes, whether that is Saka and Gyökeres rotating, so Saka can make more of these types of striker darts, and Gyökeres can be hitting the channels more instantly and go shoulder to shoulder where he is so powerful. But, as I hope I've shown, there were things to be positive about, and there were some things which clearly still needed polishing. Let's look at our off-the-ball stuff now though, and again, the caveats of fitness and timing and opening day still apply, but United found ways to exploit some of our uncharacteristic lapses, I think it's fair to say. This was our setup, which won't be unfamiliar to everyone. Gyökeres began on Casemiro, then arced his press to shadow mark Yoro as he pressed the keeper. Rice looked to cover and jump onto Casemiro when Gyökeres did that, and Odegaard on the other pivot began on De Ligt. The central centre-back, of course, who Amorim immediately promotes into a very central midfield position. And if Odegaard was to jump at all, Zubimendi would be ready himself to cover De Ligt. But mainly, Zubimendi would be hovering closer to Bruno Fernandes. Saka and Martinelli were ready to jump onto the wide centre-backs, but were always cognizant, Martinelli in particular, of United's wing-backs getting out. And I think some of our troubles started with Gyökeres, who hasn't had a pre-season nor much time with the team. There wasn't quite the confidence in his jumps yet and his pressures, which meant the intensity, I think, dwindled a little bit, and that bounce pass from De Ligt to Yoro suddenly was opened up, and that meant with our left wing often pinned deeper, pressure for us was hard to sustain, or equally, if we found pressure, a bit more difficult to apply, or if balls are pumped into the centre under less pressure. Suddenly, if we were a bit in between or neither nor like we are here with White watching Dorgu because Saka has jumped onto Shaw, but also wary of Mason Mount because Zubimendi is in between Mount and Bruno himself, it makes things harder. Here, Odegaard wants Saka to promote, which I think in a fully fit and on it Arsenal, Saka would. And in this scenario, Saliba would move out and White would step across. But with a bit of hesitancy and backpedalling, United can get free in these left pockets where so many of their dangerous players like to operate and roam into. And then counter movements like Mounts and Cunha's here, or Dorgu moving in and out, give them time and space to threaten. Whereas, when we managed to lock off United when they were playing towards their left-hand side and match them man-to-man over these more controllable distances, with Saliba stepping across and White, in this example, following Cunha's roaming, in theory, this is so much better, and it was so much better, but players are still allowed to do unstoppable things, and this is brilliant from Cunha against White. As always, though, the fight, the resilience, the deep box defending, even though Manchester United, I thought, really lacked until late on the right amount of bodies and personnel for the occupation of our box. We dug in, we worked phenomenally hard as always and protected our lead and really didn't concede any truly clear-cut opportunities. It's one of those games though where I think it's up to you what you want to take from it. For me, I take the positives from winning, but also the tempo, the willingness to play into open spaces, because the more intricate, the more fluent Arsenal haven't gone anywhere, I'm convinced. And I will turn my eyes slightly away from a one-game sample, even if pre-season was, I will admit, a bit of a mixed bag itself. It also reminds us, though, of the impact someone like Calafiori, even when he is more on the fringes of a game, can have in individual moments. I think Kai Havertz is also a shoe-in for the Anfield trip now. Wins, though, buy you time to get this right. And I understand that this season feels more definitive, more critical than ever, and people ultimately just want the trophies and are going to continue to stir until that happens. But I think as long as we understand all of this, we can begin to place this game, this opening day win, in a better spot. But sorry for repeating myself, I also want, again, another attacking signing. It's the start we wanted results-wise, and if this is us at our least convincing, then we are going to have a lot more wins to celebrate this season. Thank you so much for watching the first official tactical analysis of the season, the Premier League season at least. I'll catch you in the next one very shortly. See you later.